friend, and welcome back to another episode of the Catching Your Breath podcast. I'm Steve Austin, your host, and I am so glad that you're here today. So look, if you listen to this episode in its entirety, you will learn the difference between solitude and loneliness. Number two, you'll discover why Jesus understands your loneliness. You'll understand how quiet moments allow you to connect with your soul. And finally, I'm going to walk you through a coaching exercise on living your core values. Are you actually living out your core values? And if not, what needs to change? How do we make that happen? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So psychology today defines loneliness like this: the state of distress or discomfort that results when one perceives a gap between one's desires for social connection and actual experiences of it. What does that mean? If you are lonely, if you describe yourself as being lonely in a particular moment or season, that loneliness comes from this gap between your desire for being connected. I want to be social. I want to be connected. I want to go out. I want to do things. I want to feel connected versus the actual experience. This is what I want. Well, this is what I'm getting. I'd like to be connected 80% of the time. I'm actually feeling connected 20% of the time. And that gap in between, that's loneliness. They go on to define solitude as a state of being alone without being lonely. And that state of being alone without being lonely can lead to some really beautiful self-awareness. So I'm going to put the link to the Psychology Today article in the show notes. And now I want to talk to you about how Jesus understands your loneliness. This is from a blog I shared just before Easter, just a couple of weeks ago. So several months ago, I visited a friend in ICU, and because of certain life choices, no one else had visited him. And because he was expressing his pain in some pretty harsh words, the nurses didn't spend any extra time at his bedside. They came in, they did their job, they left. I am a pretty stubborn guy, and I know this friend of mine that his outbursts are only just an overflow of the pain that he's hiding inside. So I showed up, refused to leave, and my friend started crying. And what he said is, no one else is crazy enough to visit me, not even my wife. Well, I'm stubborn. So I stayed. We joked. We had a little sarcasm going on. We shed a few tears. And I know that I can use humor with this old guy because it softens him enough to let love sneak in and blindside him. So a few days later, he sends me this handwritten note of gratitude. And here's the part that really got me. Here's what he says. They'd given me medicine and saved my life, but I was numb, isolated on an island of my own misery. And you're sure not a doctor. You couldn't do anything for my medical condition. You're also not a psychiatrist, so you couldn't treat my mood. But what you offered me, what you always offer me, is the gift of non-judgmental connection. And when you showed up the other day in ICU, it's like a switch flipped on in both my brain and my heart. What I need most in the world is to stop feeling so alone. Well, I know a little something about loneliness because 8 years ago, loneliness nearly killed me. I was away from the usual comforts of home, separated from my wife and baby boy, working a 2-week contract job. I had severe depression, and that loneliness compounded to a really dangerous degree. It was the darkest 2 weeks of my life. and I believed my only way out was suicide. My buddy Robert Vore is a mental health professional in Atlanta, and he's the host of CXMH podcast. And he says that loneliness and depression are deadly. And Robert's right. There are studies that show that prolonged loneliness and social isolation are not only associated with depression and a decreased sense of well-being, but also anxiety, cognitive decline, schizophrenia, suicide, dementia, cardiovascular illness, and even cancer. So prolonged loneliness can kill you. Now, I want to pause here for a second, because the last thing I want you to think is that this is going to be an episode by a married man with 2 kids at home telling you how not to be lonely. That sounds really gross. If you're the single person, if you're the lonely person, if you're disconnected from others, if you don't have the connection that I'm so blessed to have. So I want to stop you here and say, no. That's not what this is about. Loneliness is really serious. So for some reason, in the grip of pandemic panic and seeking comfort the other day, I found myself flipping through the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Can you picture Jesus there, knowing the fate that lies before him? He's expecting to be arrested and eventually killed by those who hate him and his message. Jesus kneels down in exhaustion and begins to pray, begging God, please take away this pain. And then he turns to his friends. He'd actually already told them that the sorrow was crushing his life out. But his friends are asleep, every last one of them, in his greatest hour of need. And how tempting it must have been to give into the lie that we're all alone, that God has turned his back on us, and so have those we love the most. This is how loneliness seeps in. We're already fragile, and loneliness seeps in and it suffocates us. It takes our breath, and worse than that, it takes our hope. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Despair is no respecter of persons. When loneliness mixes with sadness, it's this cocktail that can destroy everything. And the weird thing is, it's right here in the despair of Jesus that I find the most comfort during this pandemic. Jesus understands my loneliness. He understands what it's like to desperately need connection, only to be faced with separation. So Gethsemane matters. Look, I can't answer this eternal question of why does a good God allow suffering. I don't know why God doesn't snap his cosmic fingers and obliterate this virus in an instant. All those questions are above my pay grade. But here's what I am absolutely convinced of. In the midst of deep woundedness, sorrow, anxiety, loneliness, the presence and compassion of others can heal us. So we're walking through this depression, and major metropolitan cities are completely shut down. We can't visit each other in person. Easter services were canceled. There wasn't a big meal at grandma's house. But there are things we can do to ease our loneliness and the loneliness of those we care about. Research is very clear that connecting with people socially, speaking regularly with family and friends, even playing games with other people can reduce your loneliness. So we're in this day and age of social distancing, and I know that requires some effort. It requires some creativity. But every time you pick up the phone, every time you send an encouraging message on social media or connect over video chat, you are becoming the very presence of God to someone else. So the hope that I have today is that God not only knows about my experience, but actually chose to enter into it. Christ meets us in our separation, and we meet each other in it. And in doing so, we give each other what we all need the most: to stop feeling so alone. I'm going to put the link to that blog post in the show notes as well. So, we're talking about loneliness. We're talking about solitude. I think that one of the keys to feeling less lonely is to start feeling at home with yourself. And if you haven't read Byron Katie's book, A Mind at Home with Itself, I highly recommend it. Here's one of my favorite quotes from that book. "Every no I say is a yes to myself. It feels right to me. People don't have to guess what I want or don't want, and I don't need to pretend. When you're honest about your yeses and nos, it's easy to live a kind life. People come and go in my life when I tell the truth, and they would come and go if I didn't tell the truth. I have nothing to gain one way and everything to gain the other. I don't leave myself guessing or guilty." So why do I share that? And why did I emphasize that very point in my book, Catching Your Breath? Because some of us are constantly surrounded by other people, and yet we feel all alone. We don't have boundaries. We say yes to everyone and everything, and we're surrounded by people, and yet we feel all alone. We're surrounded by our coworkers, or at happy hour, or at church, or City League softball, or online via social media, even entertaining our own children. But because we aren't first at home with ourselves, that constant external connection is just one more way that we numb ourselves from doing the hard work that's required to find inner peace. So the next question is this: how do you start to become at home with yourself? Let me tell you a little story about how solitude saved my life and my marriage. So 2 years after I almost died by suicide, a car wreck threatened to destroy our marriage. It was September of 2014. My little boy Ben was turning 3, and sweet Caroline was about 5 months old. I'd been in recovery, rebuilding my life for 2 years. Unfortunately, I slipped back into my old routine of pushing, performing, moving to the point of extreme exhaustion. I was working 2 jobs, pulling 60-plus hour weeks with 2 little ones and a sweet wife at home. And for some reason, on this particular Saturday morning, I had borrowed Lindsay's car. I was so tired from working until midnight the night before and having to be back by 6 a.m., the kind of tired that gives coffee the stank eye. It laughs in the face of a nap. That kind of tired. Weary in my bones kind of tired. And I only fell asleep for a second. But it was just a second too long. The impact of the other car jolted me awake. I couldn't believe this was happening. We were covered in debt. I'd picked up an extra 12-hour shift that morning to try and make ends meet. And the worst part? The insurance agent promptly reported, "Mr. Austin, your auto insurance lapsed 3 weeks ago." In my busyness, I'd completely forgotten to renew it. I called to deliver the bad news to my wife. I felt like all I ever gave her was bad news and a lack of presence. But this was too much. I can still hear her say those heavy words. "I'm taking the kids to Florida for a while until we can figure things out." I hadn't cried in front of my dad in years, but that day, standing in my parents' driveway, telling him my marriage might be over, I sobbed. I realized that in my constant struggle to be the good enough, husband, the good enough Christian, the good enough father. I'd neglected the most precious person in my life. So while my wife was packing her bags for Florida, I started racking my brain for something I could do to find some semblance of peace for us. I just knew that I had to do something different. The same old thing wasn't working anymore, and desperate times call for desperate measures. So for me, desperate meant getting really quiet. I spent that Labor Day weekend in silence in a Catholic monastery in Cullman, Alabama. I mean, it was quiet AF. I disconnected from everyone and everything I'd been using as a distraction from what was going on inside me, just like I'd done in the psych ward. But where the psych ward deals with the brain, this trip was for my soul. It was for my body. So in this borrowed cell, my soul found stillness and my body was able to rest. I turned off my phone. I only brought a couple of books, some pens, and a journal. If I was ever going to redeem my marriage, I had to first rediscover myself. And this is why Brennan Manning's words are so powerful. Here's what he says. Silent solitude makes true speech possible and personal. If I am not in love with my own belovedness, then I cannot touch the sacredness of others. If I am estranged from myself, I am likewise a stranger to others. So that weekend, I began to get back in touch with my true self. I learned that when I'm not in touch with my belovedness, I'm more susceptible to the lie that my worth is found in what I do, or what I create, or what I give. And as much as I wanted to believe I'd recovered and was in a great place, and the truth is I wasn't. I wasn't in a healthy frame of mind at all. I'd worked so hard to have my ego stroked by how well I performed and how loudly the crowd applauded. And a weekend of stillness, of solitude, allowed me to realize that and take a step toward healing my marriage. So that weekend of silent contemplation reminded me again that I am loved because of who I am, not in spite of it. The excerpt I just read to you is from Catching Your Breath, The Sacred Journey from Chaos to Calm. You can download that ebook for free now on my site, catchingyourbreath.com, or you can listen to the entire audiobook by going back just a few episodes on this podcast. So, if you would like to make some more online friends, if you're feeling healthy, you are at home with yourself, but you are craving connection, I want to invite you to join the Catching Your Breath community on Facebook. Because of this COVID-19, the pandemic, I have opened the group up for free for a limited time. So if you go to the show notes today, click on the link, request to be added, I'll add you to the group, and it's a safe place where you can just lay down your burdens and rest. We have fun. We post some silly stuff from time to time. I post some coaching exercises and some meditations, all kind of bonus content that you don't just get on the blog. I'd love to have you there. So, why is solitude so important? I think that solitude is necessary for you to be able to reflect on what really matters in your life, for you to be able to develop a personal belief system based on that reflection. You can't be an authentic individual by constantly conforming to the needs, expectations, and values of other people. So, solitude is important because it's therapeutic. The sound of silence is therapeutic. It allows you to look deep within your soul. And as you get quiet, as you begin to create and cultivate a stillness practice, you start to uncover hidden feelings, hidden thoughts and ideas when you get away from that external noise. So when you're alone, you're able to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and that approach takes you away from what's happening around you. So you're alone only with what is inside of you. Solitude allows you to come to terms with your weaknesses and to also be empowered by your strengths. And then, when that's over, you return to the world around you and you're more equipped with the power that you need to handle difficult situations. So your weaknesses are suppressed because you've embraced your strengths. As you get quiet, as you take that time to look into your soul, you begin to understand more clearly what's important to you. You figure out what makes you tick. You connect with those things and allow those things to dictate your actions. Spending time in silence, alone, in solitude, it takes you back to the real you, to your true self. And it reminds you of the part that your conscience plays in making decisions. It helps you keep check of what really matters. You're able to dismiss the confusion of the world, and you're able to focus on what matters to you. So I believe today that your soul is as critical to your being as your body and your mind. And my prayer for you today is that you would be able to embrace your soul's ability to guide you. My prayer for you today is that you would commit to introspection, that you would look within so that you can continue to lead a life of integrity, purpose, peace, and joy. So let me ask you 3 questions. Number 1, in the midst of a difficult situation or season, do you take time to meditate? Number 2, what coping skills do you already have in place when your soul is in turmoil? And number 3, do you sometimes lose track of what's important to you? So do you take the time to meditate? What coping skills do you already have in place? And do you sometimes lose track of what's most important? I think that as you begin to ask yourself those questions, some things are going to become clear. And part of what's going to become clear are your personal core values. And before I let you go, I want to walk you through an exercise that I believe will help you get really clear on the discrepancy between the values that you have and how much you're actually living in line with those values. So I want you to get a piece of paper and pen. You can pause this and come back, but take your paper and pen, and inside that piece of paper, I want you to draw the biggest circle that you can draw. Okay? And you're going to divide your circle into slices, but don't do it yet. You're going to divide that circle into slices, and each slice is going to represent the amount of time you spend on different elements or areas of your life. So the larger the slice, the more time you spend on that area. So I'm going to give you a few examples. You don't have to use all of these. You can certainly come up with your own, but here's some examples that are pretty common. Immediate family, community, neighborhood, extended family, spirituality, work, fun or recreation, creativity, personal development, goals and values, romance and love, volunteering, money, health, and exercise. Those are the most common ones that I see. You can add to those, you can remove from that, but you're going to take those values that you have, the different areas of your life and the time that you spend on those, and you're going to put slices of your life inside this circle. So this represents your current life. This is not what you hope to be. This is the life that you're living today. And the more honest you can be with yourself, the quicker you can find healing. So take a few moments and divide that circle up into slices, and each slice representing the amount of time you spend on particular areas or elements of your life. So why don't you pause this episode and come back when you have that first circle completed, because we've got another one. Okay, now for part 2, you're going to complete the same exercise with a whole new circle. Okay, I'm sorry. You're going to create a whole new circle on another piece of paper, on the back of the piece of paper that you have, another circle as large as you can draw on that paper. But this time I want you to think about where you would actually want to spend your time. What makes you happy? What gives you peace of mind? And make this circle look like the life that you want to live, embracing the values that you have. So this is your ideal life. So take some time and do that. Go ahead and pause this episode, and then I've got a few questions for you to wrap up this exercise. Okay, for part 3, I want you to take some time and reflect on the following questions as a sort of a form of self-evaluation. The first question is, what's the difference between your current circle versus your ideal circle? What's the difference? Number 2, did you notice any inconsistencies? What were they? Number 3, what prevents you from taking action to make your current life closer to your ideal life? Do you have some internal or external barriers? And which of those barriers is the biggest one for you to overcome right now? And the last question, number 4, how could you align your life with your true priorities? Look, it takes changing and reframing some of your habits to change your life. I get that. But what small, manageable new practices could you put into place to work toward your ideal values circle? Those are the questions I think you should be asking. And to help you get closer to that ideal, maybe make copies of your ideal circle and hang it somewhere where you're going to see it every day. Seeing that ideal wheel on a regular basis will remind you, and it will help you make values-based decisions every day. So maybe you're sitting there going, why the heck did we just do an exercise on values when we're talking about the difference between loneliness and solitude? Well, I think the whole point is to get you to being at home with yourself. It's to get you to a place of belonging, whether you're physically all by yourself or surrounded by people, to get you to embrace who you are, the things that matter to you, those true priorities that matter to you more than anything else. And when you embrace those and live those out, you're going to naturally attract people who are attracted to similar values. In part 2, we're going to dive deep into how to be at home with yourself. The next episode, I'm going to share 7 ways to embrace your individuality, 6 benefits of embracing your quirky side, and 8 steps to embracing that quirky side. So we're going to talk about ways to embrace your individuality, benefits of doing so, and then 8 steps to get you to embrace your quirky side, those things that make you unique. Hey, before I let you go, I want to tell you about these soul care strategy sessions I've just opened up. If you are ready to heal your image of God and or rebuild your self-worth, I'd love to talk to you. I know that it can be really difficult trying to reconcile our wounds, the hopes we have, what we believe about God. That can feel really scary. So to help you out, to help you start reconciling your mental, emotional, and spiritual health, I'm offering a personal one-on-one soul care strategy with me. The call is going to take about 45 minutes, and we're going to have a really deep, vulnerable, personal discussion. And what you're going to get is three things. You're going to get clear. You're going to create a picture of what a healthy soul looks like for you. The second thing you're going to do is detox your soul. So we're going to, in that first call, find the things that are zapping your energy, keeping you from living a life of freedom and joy. And finally, you're going to find immediate relief. You're going to find immediate relief. You're going to find a surge of energy to take control and make important changes in your inner world. So if you're interested, if this resonates with you at all, I'm offering these soul care strategy sessions for 50% off. You get this call for $47. So ask yourself these three questions. How long have you been struggling to reconcile your mental, emotional, and spiritual health? If you could embrace wholeness, if you could love your life and rebuild your self-worth, how great would that be on a scale from 1 to 10? And finally, what are the things that are zapping your joy the most? If you're interested, you want to get started on this today, 50% off. It's $47. Go to my website, catchingyourbreath.com. Right at the top of the page, you're going to see strategy session. Click on it, scroll to the bottom, fill out the little form there at the bottom, and let's get started on these while I've still got space in my calendar. All right, friends. Thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting the show. Please, please, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. Tell people why you love this show, why they should listen, what it means to you. And if I can be of service to you in any way, all you got to do is reach out. All the social medias, I am Steve Austin, or you can email me, steve@IamSteveAustin.com. I am in your corner, and I'm so grateful for you. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.